Um, welcome. If you're seeing me on LinkedIn and joining me, this is something completely new. My first LinkedIn Live, and not only that, but we're bringing the Connected Leadership podcast live to LinkedIn. So my goal now is that whenever I record interviews for the Connected Leadership podcast, I will also record them on LinkedIn as well. Now we're recording the episode for the first Monday of the month, and the first Monday of the month I'm always joined by my friend Luca Signoretti. Luca is a leadership strategist based out of Monaco, I believe, if I remember rightly. We've spoken a lot about various areas around networking and professional relationships. So we meet up once a month and just explore different topics. So welcome, Luca, and thanks for joining me. And let's hope people can hear us.
Yeah,
if
let's go that. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
if you can, I'm hoping I can see your comments and reactions on my screen. This is all new technology for me, so please type in the box. If I can see it, I will keep an eye open and I'll reference it. In terms of the topic for Luca and I to talk about today, I've just been having my lunch. We're recording this for those of you listening on the podcast. We're recording this on the 20th of January at lunchtime in Europe. And I've just been watching Donald Trump eventually leave the White House ahead of the inauguration. Now, I'm not planning to make anything political of this. I want to explore this from a professional relationships perspective, but I think there is something really interesting to explore here. A lot of the commentary, and I am watching CNN, which takes a particular bias, but a lot of the commentary on Trump leaving the White House is based around how he's broken convention in many ways. Not only by not acknowledging defeat, not addressing Joe Biden by name, but just simple things that have become convention in the US. He hasn't given Joe Biden a tour of the White House. Melania Trump hasn't done the same for Dr. Jill Biden. He has no plans to attend the inauguration. In fact, as we're recording, he's getting on a plane at St Andrews Air Force Base and heading to Florida ahead of the inauguration. Whereas 4 years ago, he sat in a car with President Obama, or President-elect Obama, as he would have been at that point, in a convoy on the way to the inauguration. And he hasn't left a note for his successor. And I was looking just before coming online at some of the notes that previous presidents have left for each other. This was something that was started by President Reagan initially, and he wrote a note for George H.W. Bush, who was his vice president, obviously. But since then, we've seen changes of party with changes of president. But that hasn't changed how they've been gracious in handing over the baton. So George H.W. Bush wrote to Bill Clinton, "I am rooting hard for you." Clinton then wrote to President George W. Bush in 2000, "From this day you are president of all of us. I salute you and wish you success and much happiness." And George W. Bush handed over to President Obama, and he talked about a country that is pulling for you, including me. And then Obama said to Trump, "Congratulations on a remarkable run. Millions have placed their hopes in you, and all of us, regardless of party, should hope for expanded prosperity and security during your tenure." So I thought that this made a really interesting topic for a conversation, and I can see you nodding along as I went through those, Luca. And I think there's a real question around professional relationships that you have with your competitors, both internally and externally, and people you disagree with generally. I'm a member of the Professional Speaking Association. The PSA is an offshoot of the NSA, the National Speaking Association in the United States, and that was founded by a speaker called Cavett Robert. And when Cavett Robert founded the NSA, people said, "Why are you founding an association for your competitors?" And Cavett Robert replied, and I'm not quoting verbatim here, but what he said was, "We can spend all the time worrying about the size of our slice of the pie, but sometimes it's better just to get together and work together to make the pie bigger." So Luca, there's two schools of thought with this. I work with a lot of industries, as I'm sure you do, where compliance and secrecy come top of the list. So a lot of people struggle with thoughts about engaging with their successors, and Cavett Roberts' approach would be anathema to them. How do you strike the balance between collaboration and competition, and where are the lines for you?
Oh, no, first of all, thanks for having me, Andy. I didn't want to interrupt you before. It's a pleasure to try this LinkedIn, live. Let's see how it goes. I'm really, really excited about that. So, give it to your point. The point is really there's so many kind of situation where you compete with somebody. You might compete for it's internally for some kind of resources. This is if you have been through a little bit of corporate life, you know that the once per year or now quite often you have really to compete for resources. Even if you like the person, even the head of the other department is one of your friends, you're still competing with them. And so at the end, in this case, the pie is limited because it's the budget you have. But it doesn't mean that you cannot find a way to exchange value and continue building the relationship. There are so many ways that you can increase the value generation generated by the relationship. At the end of the day, what we are looking for is for both of us, and in this case, first personally as a leader, and then our department, okay, to be able to access more value somehow, okay, produce more value. So part of this is getting more resources, but also the outcome, of course, is that. So imagine how thanks to a great relationship, and even if it's a competitor in somehow on many fields, you can still find a way to by increasing the value of the quality of relationship to generate synergies, or simply helping things or accelerating things. And whenever we accelerate something, we have to remember that time is money, and we become much more effective, and everybody's going to benefit from it. So even if just we collaborate on some points, and just for this fact we generate more value, at the end of the day we have what we're looking for. So being competitive on one field, one part of the business, doesn't mean to necessarily be enemies for the rest of your life or your business activity.
I think that point about generating value is the key here, because where people are struggling to feel comfortable with collaboration with competitors, is because there's a scarcity mentality, and I'm going to hoard what I already have. But if you can shift that mindset into one of, I want to increase what I have, and now if that means that my competitors also increase what they have, where do I find myself at the end of that? And if you win, it goes back to this analogy of increasing the size of the pie generally. What does it matter if your competitors are doing well as well? Let's increase the size of the market, for example. Not relevant in all situations, of course, but that creating value, I think, is the core of this.
Absolutely.
Let's look at, I mean, where I think this is really going to jar with most people is where there are industrial secrets at stake. Mm-hmm. So I remember a number of years ago, I was delivering a session for the medical devices industry. So it was a networking event for businesses across medical devices. And I had a 90-minute presentation with 3 breakout sessions where I broke people into groups just to discuss key issues. Things like what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? What's your biggest challenge at the moment? And everyone happily got into the first breakout, and the vibe in the room was buzzing and everyone was deep in conversation. Everybody apart from one guy. And this one person sat in the front row with his arms crossed, staring straight ahead like a statue. So I went up to him and I asked why he wasn't participating. And he explained that he wasn't allowed to. And he said that, in our industry, there are Chinese walls and we have to be very careful what we share with our competitors. And I get that completely. And in an industry like medical devices, that's clear and that's apparent. But I looked around the room and I said, but everyone else is able to share things. what is so different? And I said, for me, the key thing here is that you are in control of what you share, and you know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Just join the next breakout, because I'm about to finish this one, but the next breakout, just join a group. You don't even have to say much, but just see how the conversation goes. And he nodded and smiled, but I noticed that as soon as I went into the next breakout, he left the room. And I referenced that. I didn't say who it was. You know, there were over 150 people there, so people won't have known or noticed who that was. But I mentioned it at the next breakout after the next breakout with the group, and it led to some interesting debate. But the consensus was, yeah, we do have a choice of what we share. What would your take be on that?
Well, definitely there are some industries that are much more, kind of sensitive from this point of view. And I also lead some kind of networking event for me as well on my side. And I have this kind of feelings that some of them just stop talking at a certain moment and say, okay, I cannot go farther than that. And so this is really limited. But if you count how many industries we are talking about in this case, we have a very, very limited one. And as you said, I've noticed that you can really do and build relationship exchange about a lot of things, even very sensitive industry. The real idea is not about what you said; it's about how you build a relationship. But this is something that must be distinguished. Okay, when we meet somebody and we build a personal relationship, doesn't mean that we have to exchange secrets. That's not the point at all. That's what you have to do, of course, is to build a base of something that will grow over time, and it will bring collaboration. Collaboration means could be a lot of things. Could be pushing together in the same direction in terms of new regulation, for example, something that's already happened, of course. But if they have this kind of relationship in place, again, things will be easier, will be faster, will be, you can get more result. You can generate more value, not only for your company, but also for your industry. So I have a lot of people that when ask me, you always say, Luca, that the secret is to give first. No, Andy, that's what we tell every time. We have to give first. And a lot of people are so scared about the idea, what should I give first? It's like you have to give really, I don't know, incredible value, or I don't know, money sometimes. But of course, you don't have to pay and buy the relationship. It's just that you have to think about how you can help the other person. It could be very simple things, not necessarily secrets, not necessarily something that gives an unfair advantage, or let's put it this way, something that in somehow takes something out from your corporation, your organization. Okay, it can be something that for the moment is just you give a little bit of value, and your organization will get a lot of value back when, for example, we have to do something together for the industry, or when we have to, for example, face something that there is no reason why we should do the things twice. You know that a lot of in other industries, I mean, I'm not specifically in the pharmaceutical, I'm not very much in this, but in a lot of industries, there are this association that the idea is really to reduce costs, to make things easier, to smooth, to gain a kind of a negotiation power. So all these things are already in place. And most of the time, this kind of collaboration are boosted enormously if there is a personal relationship, and of course there is trust because of this personal relationship.
Let's take our collaboration as an example, and it's just funnily enough just occurred to me to do that because on the face of it, we are in a competitive space. We both talk about the same ideas. We both work with the same market. So why would I feature you every month on my podcast? Why would we have these conversations and share our ideas? But if you look at Connected Leadership, for example, the book that I brought out in the summer, I took from something you shared an idea that I was able to add to what I shared. Now, I gave the credit where it was due, but that then deepened the knowledge that I was able to share in the book. And actually, I was able to give my spin on that model, which we talked about in last month's podcast, giving something to you in terms of adding to that model. And just these constant conversations we're having, it's enabling both of us to refine our content, make it better, sharpen our ideas. And I'm not aware of any loss in doing that. And, let's say someone listens to the podcast and they think, well, Luca's the right person to go with rather than me. That's absolutely fine. It might work the other way around, but these are small fry compared to the bigger picture. And in fact, you share the podcast with your network every month, so I'm getting more listeners and I'm getting more engagement because of your involvement. And I've found that with my membership of the Professional Speaking Association. I've brought colleagues in on contracts that I'm working on. One of my biggest clients now comes from a fellow PSA member introducing me to her client, and that happens quite a lot. But I'm also getting market insights and ideas. I'm getting advice that's making my life easier. So it comes back to that value and that output, and actually understanding how it's going to make things better for you by collaborating with other people. I mean, for you, when you reached out to me, because it was you originally who connected with me on LinkedIn, probably about a year ago, I would guess, or just over. Yep. Actually, maybe a year and a half or so ago. Was there, what's in your mind when you reach out to someone in the same space as you?
Yeah, I think the main idea was to we all know that we have just one brain. Okay, so somehow we know that we have a point of view, we have a lot of biases. So we know that somehow if we keep for us or a few, the kind of restrict the number of people that more or less think like us, the evolution of our thought and the ability to build new methods, approach, theories, whatever you want to call it, to help the others is extremely limited. So whenever I join and I contact somebody like you from really scratch. I mean, I went through LinkedIn with a classic, "Hi, Andy, we do more or less the same things. I would love to get in touch with you and talk about that." Is more. Let's see how we can really evolve. I was not thinking about, of course, being a competitor from that point of view. And certainly, I have the idea that at the end, I would gain an enormous amount of value from this connection. And of course, I was hopeful to give it the same kind of amount to you. But in my mind was more, how can I grow my idea? How can I grow my reasoning with comparing my thoughts and my ideas with another person? And I think this is, in the corporate life, it's really something missing, this is really, unfortunately, we are so much. I've done 25 years of corporate life, so I know how sometimes we are so close and minded in this, but there is no point in sharing, for example, thoughts, ideas with people also from other industries, not necessarily your closest or let's say biggest enemy. That's maybe not always the case, but with maybe a different slight kind of industry, or maybe a different level of dimension, and just open up and say, I'm thinking about that. What do you think? And you will see that the other person will come back to you with definitely most of the case with something different, new, and then of course you build on it. So that's really the base of kind of brainstorming, and probably the same thing you have in your mastermind group, isn't it? Where you just throw the idea, and then you can get back them with kind of added value. Okay, and this could happen definitely also in terms of competitors. Let's call this way. The problem is that philosophically, okay, the corporate are not like that, because the idea is really to they don't see any value in sharing, and this really starts from the top, frankly. And as many other things in a corporate life, if you see that, if your boss tells you, okay, this is, you go there for this training, where you have a lot of training, cross industry. So sometimes I have competitors in the room, And they look like, they have received the input from their boss not to talk with the enemy, something like that. So this is really, I think this is a limited kind of approach and mindset. Also because let's remember this again and again, and the big change, the big threats, the big opportunities, again, are outside the most of the case are outside our industry. So we just basically receive something, and we suffer something, or we can eventually take the opportunity. There's something that is really taking place in another originating in another industry, another domain. So we are all some kind of people looking at this, and without a lot of information, without a lot of clarity about that. And so, putting together some minds in this case could really benefit the industry. I totally get to this point as you start with.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking back to the spark for this conversation, which is politics. And how, okay, I shared those examples of gracious convention in the US, and we have similar in the UK, where a predecessor hands over to their successor in a gracious way, normally, irrespective of party belief. But one of the things that frustrates me in our political system is its binary nature, and particularly in the UK and the US. I mean, I know in Italy, where you're originally from, it's a lot more convoluted than that, because there's been a lot of coalition governments over the years. We've had one in my adult lifetime, and it frustrates me when I see challenges like the pandemic, where everything's based around confrontation rather than collaboration, not being able to get together and say, well, let's work on this, because, okay, if we're coming from a traditional conservative perspective, maybe there's something in Labour's perspective, the Republican and the Democrat perspective, that combined they can work together, and the solution lies somewhere in bringing our minds together to solve an issue. And many industries are suffering at the moment. The pandemic has brought in new problems no one's faced before. Retail would be a classic sector. I would hope that within retail, the big department stores, the big retail groups are talking to each other and saying, how can we collectively overcome the challenge of the pandemic? I don't know that they are. And I think that we need to seek that, in politics, in business, in life generally, and internally within organisations. And I often talk about how I often see more competition than collaboration within organisations. Each department is protecting their piece of the pie, to use the Cavett Robert metaphor. They're worried about, they want to get the credit for their piece of work, and so they don't support other departments. While on an individual level, individuals might be worried more about the job that they want to get next and who's competing with them for that job than actually working together. So let's look at that. How do you deal with colleagues internally who have that competitive mindset rather than a collaborative one?
Well, the modern leader, frankly, doesn't have a lot of choice. They have to be collaborative. Let me just remind that if the stakeholders, number of stakeholders, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, were limited and mostly were internal. Okay, and away, there were the classic. I don't know. I was my field was marketing. I was, of course, in contact with sales and maybe kind of logistics. So the things that were much more involved in my field, and not almost nothing to do with the other part of the company, when except maybe a couple of times per year. Now, if we move to 2020, you can imagine that there is a lot of more number of stakeholders that just added. Imagine all the power that the consumer group have taken. Imagine all the power the social media with the influencers have taken, or the science, the knowledge. All these things have brought so many the necessity to add so many relationship with stakeholders, that the idea that now you're only competing with, and you have to build only with your competitor inside the company is very limited. Okay, it's really looking at to your belly, and everything else is happening outside. So the point is that at the end of the day, when you think about silos, because that's what we are talking at the end, because silos is something that happens almost, let's say, naturally. Nobody has decided, of course, to have silos. It's just the fact that people have this kind of mindset that the more they shine, the better it is for them. And if they, of course, sink the other, it's going to be better for their career. That is a very short-term kind of approach. And whatever I always say that if you don't understand that you're always being a kind of independent kind of professional. So you work for this company, and but you are really providing service with this. You are really the president of of a me company, and this means that you have to go well beyond the short term. So the guy that now you compete now in your company could be, I don't know, because it's another department that again is competing with you for the resources, could be the next CEO of another company. And imagine the relationship. If you have a strong relationship with this guy, it could open up a lot of opportunity. So it's not just an opportunistic point of view. It's a kind of time line you want to work on. If you really go for the short term, you just think about the next promotion. Yes, maybe you can get it, but you're not maximizing your value on the long term. And I think all of us, we should think about our career, okay, not as part of that company or just the next step, but as really the lifelong one. And so if we take this kind of approach, we understand that building a relationship also with competitors, the people that are currently competitors could instead build incredible opportunity in the future.
I think it's a great way of thinking about it and looking at your career as not, I used to work for an American corporate, and all of my actions on the project I worked on in the UK were determined by the quarterly position on the New York Stock Exchange, which was incredibly frustrating because you couldn't plan for the future. You couldn't, make short-term sacrifices for long-term gain on the project. And I mean, that was my last corporate job because I just couldn't work, under those conditions. We have to move from that quarterly thinking to that joined up thinking and realize that what we do now will actually have repercussions potentially 5 years down the line. And you and I both know that from relationships that we've built up over the years. And it's important for people to see that. So I think that's a fantastic point. Let's take that point and then say, okay, so our listener has now really bought into this idea, and they started listening to this and thinking, yeah, that's not for me. I can't be collaborative. I have to think about the downsides of competition. But we've convinced them. But the people around them, the people within their company, are saying, no, you cannot talk to that person, or that the colleagues that they try to be collaborative with are still skeptical, cynical, and thinking about their own slice of the pie. How do you change the narrative? How do you get people on board with you and make sure that they're not cynical about your approach to be more collaborative with them?
Well, I think that to be very, very practical, what you have to do is we know that trust is built through interactions. Okay, so whenever we teach relationship building, and I'm sure you do the same as me, you stress the fact that it's not just a matter of time to build a relationship with somebody. Because somebody say, I know this guy from, I don't know, 2 years or 3 years, nothing happened. We cannot collaborate. We don't exchange any value. And I say this is the wrong kind of KPI. It's not the time. It's the number of interaction. Why? Because the number of interaction every interaction give us the opportunity to build trust. Okay, so I promise something to you, a piece big or small, doesn't matter. But if I deliver, And we are, for example, we are doing this with this podcast, isn't it? Every once in a while we get together, we have a nice conversation, things goes in the direction we both want. Perfect. We know that we can trust each other. Okay, it's even more. Okay, so this is the number of interaction is what they need. So my suggestion when they ask me how I can build with the relationship with somebody who's really not very open to that, and is quite, it's not very positive about my approach to them, is to try to be consistent over time. So don't just pretend to the other person to change in a couple of times. So giving a small kind of piece of value, okay, small things like, I don't know, you might sometimes if you see he's very busy or she's very busy, propose, I don't know, can I do something small for you? Nothing big, really. Maybe I can help you with this. I can do small part of your task, or you'll say, I don't know, I can participate in a short meeting for you, whatever. And you do this 3 or 4 times, you will see that the other person will stop, acting like it's completely against you, as let's say, or against this kind of relationship, and start realizing that you are really delivering. Okay, so basically doing and showing your commitment in building this relationship speaks really much more than just a lot of words. And I would like to have a great relationship with you. Just do it. Just go there and find the small and big ways to help, and the other person will definitely appreciate. If it's not the case, well, at a certain point, you will accept the idea that some people just are not the right person for you. So we start from the concept that we cannot change people, okay? And I'm sure you agree with that. So start from this idea: we don't change people. We act in a best possible way. That's our part of our control. So the control, the part we can control is the giving, okay? And so give repeatedly, okay, hoping that the other person will perceive this. If after, I don't know, 4 or 5 times you see the other person still doesn't perceive it, well, you at least you have done your best, and you have to accept the idea sometimes people just are like that.
I think it's a great answer. Yeah,
what I say, let me finish with that and say, I always think next, and I move to another person. Okay, there is always be another person that can help you, and you can collaborate and grow together.
I think it's a great answer. Absolutely agree. And I really like this idea of don't focus so much on what you can't control and worry about them. Just focus on what you can control and your behaviour. And then over time you start to see, are you seeing changes or not, and you can follow through accordingly. And it sort of ties back into your previous answer, and that's focusing on the long term, what you're trying to achieve, and how it's going to impact long term career or role or business success, rather than, well, that meeting didn't go very well, and then forget it, I'm not interested. So just to finish off, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I didn't warn you about this because I didn't plan it. But we started out talking about what's happening in America right now, as we're filming this and recording this. So I want you to put you in the place of the two main parties there. So let's start off. You're President Trump. You have lost the election, but you don't feel that it was correct. You don't feel it was justified. You're not happy about losing. You don't want to acknowledge your successor, but it gets to the point where it's become inevitable. What should he have done differently?
Well, this is a great question. I think the Trump is an entire character. So you cannot say well, you should have done this better and kept this part. Probably it's part of the package. With Trump, you buy the package, isn't it? So it's made like that. And again, I think the guy has a great, anyway, has built a great potential for for a come back in 4 years time, and if they allow him, and eventually if he can avoid any kind of impeachment. But if you see from let's say a relationship point of view, he has built an incredible relationship with a lot of a big part of the population, and this is something that I mean, it's not a positive. I mean, I personally I don't think Trump could be should be a kind of example, but the way he has built this kind of following, that's really interesting. I mean, I think from a relationship point of view, it would be nice to study how he has built in just 4 years time this incredible, you know, a really close relationship with big part of the population. What should have done different, of course, is it's part of the idea that to do what you have to do, you have to you have to please someone, and at the same time you have to be aided by somebody else. That's the limiting part I probably didn't like. And so it's getting back to our situation in a corporate environment, okay, feeling that you have to kill someone to shine, and you have to basically please somebody on the other side. That's a very short-term approach. Yeah. Okay, again, you don't want to be so short-term that say just because the guy in this moment is competing with me on something is going to compete for the rest of the life. It's not the case.
And I think if you take the subjectivity out of it and look at it objectively, your point is, I mean, Trump may well have said, well, if I accommodate Biden and the general consensus, I start to lose my base, and that's where his power is. So his relationship is with that base. And so he may well be thinking about it strategically from that perspective. And okay,
I think so, definitely.
And so Biden, you know, you're coming in and you've got this. Your predecessor is breaking all convention, doesn't acknowledge you, doesn't mention you by name, won't go through the normal protocols for handover. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's making the life of Biden easier, because you know it's just enough that he does the opposite that Trump has done. To be the perfect, or the let's say the traditional president that is usually, you know, much more loved than kind of the Trump type of president. So, frankly speaking, from a Biden point of view, I think it makes life easier. Think about coming up after Obama, for example. There's, you know, it's kind of resemble other people, was loved by large part of the population, blah blah blah. So you have a very tough kind of a comparison. With Trump, you know exactly what you should do. You should almost do the opposite that he did, to be much more popular, much more also international level. Because let's not forget, at the end, one of the negative aspect was the international collaboration that Trump has somehow reduced or put at risk. And again, looking at the medium long term, America, as all the other countries, need this kind of collaboration. Think about all the trade problematics that they are having between US and just the EU. I mean, Europe. And that's reducing the growth, the GDP of the both side of both sides. So it's how stupid is this for the moment? I mean, again, in the short term, or you are trying to have more people at work, so generate jobs, and the other times on the other side you reduce the international trade that automatically reduce jobs. So it's kind of strange things, but it's not. Should it be very difficult for Biden to do better in the eyes of most people?
Time will tell. That's the politics show finished for today. Luca, always interesting. I hope our new LinkedIn audience have found it so as well. Luca and I speak like this every month on the Connected Leadership podcast, the first Monday of each month. On Thursday, on the first Thursday of the month, we have a short Ask Andy. So if you have any questions you want me to address about professional relationships, please send them across to me, Andy at lopata.co.uk, or via LinkedIn, or however you want. Luca, I will look forward to chatting to you next month. We'll see what's happening in the States and what's happening elsewhere in the world, but we'll be
Abs-
talking professional
Absolutely, Andy.
relationships.
It's been a
Thanks,
great
Luca.
pleasure as usual. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.